One family.
Oh, my God.
Possible 45.
Two horrible tragedies. That's pretty dark stuff. At sea and on land.
My father, he is in bed and someone shot him in the head.
Do you remember what you noticed?
First thing I thought is this crime scene is staged.
Linda always felt that she deserved more than what she was getting, because she and my dad were always butting heads.
So we've got no weapons, we've got no enemies that we know of.
And no more details, because she disappears.
I told her not to go on that boat.
So she went out of the way to give them information in case something happened.
Yes, indeed.
It's just getting wilder and wilder.
Because in the middle of the ocean, nobody can hear you scream.
Every fisherman has a story about the one that got away. And this is Nathan Carman's. The 22-year-old was set to meet up with his mom, Linda, for a late-night fishing trip out here off the coast of Rhode Island. But for Linda, the trip was less about catching bass and more about bonding with her son.
Fishing was one of the things that brought them together, and that was Linda really giving herself to the experience because Linda hated fishing. Linda didn't eat fish, but she thought this was the only thing that made Nathan happy, and she wanted to connect with her son in any way possible.
That was a common occurrence. They used to go either weekly or sometimes bi-weekly.
Nathan and his mother, they'd taken a boating course. They had some fundamental knowledge, but they stuck pretty close to land and were fishing for stripers and blues.
Nathan's experience was, I would characterize him as a recreational fisherman.
Mom and son planned to cruise toward Block Island in this boat which Nathan recently bought, one that just passed inspection by the Coast Guard a month earlier. That's comforting to Linda, who has a better to be safe than sorry approach when it comes to boating.
So she begins to tell her friends about this fishing trip and shares information as to where they're going to be at specific times during that trip.
Linda is so cautious. She even texts photos of the boat and its registration number to her friends so it could be easily spotted if the boat breaks down.
You're relying on your engine, you're relying on electronics to get you there.
On a starless night with calm seas, the two depart Ram Point Marina in Rhode Island at about 11 p.m. Linda texts her friends that the journey is underway. The boat is never seen or heard from again.
One of my sisters had called me and said Linda and Nathan are missing. And I kind of freaked out.
Linda's friends begin to worry on Sunday of that weekend because Linda had claimed that she was going to come back and text them when she arrived.
Linda always did a float log. And, you know, when Linda got back, she'd call her friend Sharon, and Sharon never received the phone call.
That's when two of her best friends reach out to authorities and say, something has happened. There are two missing boaters off the coast of Rhode Island. We need your help.
It started out as a typical missing persons investigation, which is not criminal in nature. Our first order of business is naturally to find the missing people, gather the facts and circumstances to try to determine how they potentially went missing. Oftentimes people are not missing, they're just overdue.
The U.S. Coast Guard quickly begins a search over the Atlantic.
The United States Coast Guard really deployed every available resource that they had to find this missing boat. They deployed fixed-wing aircraft, reconnaissance planes, Coast Guard cutters.
Given the nature of the success rate that the Coast Guard has with search and rescue, I was very, very shocked that they were not finding anything.
We defer to the Coast Guard for search and rescue efforts. In that respect, they were really scouring the ocean, and the search efforts came up unsuccessful.
I think it was day 6 that the Coast Guard made a decision to call off any additional search. And at that point, they had covered 64,000 square nautical miles, which is a massive, massive search area.
So the Orient Lucky, which is a Chinese cargo ship, and they were out around 115 miles south of Martha's Vineyard as they were shifting ballast in their ship.
The Orient Lucky routinely travels the high seas picking up cargo, but this time it will make headlines for picking up something else. Lucky indeed.
They saw what they believed was an orange ball popping out of the ocean about 1 square nautical mile from where the cargo ship was positioned at the time. And when they got a little closer, they realized it was a life raft. And inside that life raft was a figure, a young man standing and waving a flag in distress. Getting this large freighter close enough to not kill Nathan Carman, but save Nathan Carman was a challenge. And I think the captain made a certain maneuver that allowed them to get a little closer to Nathan where they could deploy a life ring, and the life ring landed several feet away from where the life raft was. So Nathan then had to jump out of the life raft and swim.
The stunned crew members document the rescue with a series of photos and videos. Once he's on board, Nathan is offered hot soup, water, and dry clothes.
I got a call from my supervisor saying that Nathan had been recovered by a passing ship. I was shocked, and I was thankful that there was a survivor.
The rescue, a kind of needle in a haystack, becomes international news.
And a man lost at sea with his mother for 8 days has been found alive in good condition.
There were pictures of Nathan that were on the front page of newspapers all over the world, because everybody thought that this was a wild story.
Next tonight, here, the family mystery at sea. More than 100 miles from land, the discovery, and authorities asking what happened.
Nathan, this is United States Coast Guard, Boston. Over.
Mom and I, 2 people, myself and my mom, were fishing, and there was a funny noise in the engine compartment. I looked and saw a lot of water. The boat dropped out from under my feet. When I saw the life raft, I did not see my mom. Have you found her?
No, we haven't been able to find her yet.
Nathan Carman is still on that freighter. He's expected to arrive in Boston tomorrow night.
So now we can start to maybe get some insight as to what transpired and why it transpired. But it was also concerning because Linda hadn't been recovered.
Happy to be back on land, but exhausted by his ordeal, Nathan heads home and asks for privacy.
I would just like to thank the public for their prayers and for their concern for both my mother and for myself.
It's not the first time this family has dealt with drama and tragedy.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
This is a nautical map. The area that Nathan departed from is right up here. His transit would have taken him down this body of water here. And that is the point in which one of the individuals traveling inbound observed Nathan and Linda on the boat. And that was the last time that anyone saw the boat.
In the days and weeks after his dramatic sea rescue, Nathan finds himself just as alone on land as he was at sea. And he feels like the media has gotten his story wrong. So he agrees to an interview with ABC News.
Well, it would be great to have people embracing you, saying, we're glad you're home, we're glad you're alive. It hasn't been that.
Loneliness seems to be Nathan's constant companion. He grew up an only child. His parents divorced when he was little. Kids made fun of him at school.
I heard people trying to imitate him or, try to make fun of the way he spoke. And I've definitely seen people mock the way he ran down the hallway.
I got the impression that a lot of people didn't try to talk to him, and maybe that kind of contributed to his loneliness or feeling isolated and uncomfortable being in crowds and with other people.
His best friend in the world was one who wouldn't judge him, a horse named Cruz.
Yes, I was very fortunate in that regard, and I was able to really form a strong bond emotionally.
Cruz and Nathan had a very tight bond. It was definitely his best friend, his confidant. I went to the stable once with Linda and Nathan. We were ready to leave the stable. I said, well, where's Nathan? Go on in and get Nathan. She's like, no, Nathan loves to spend time with Cruz alone before we leave. And he was there for probably a good half hour, if not longer, just spending time with Cruz in his stall.
But when Nathan is 17, that bond shatters. Cruz dies. Devastated, Nathan runs away from his Connecticut home. Nathan doesn't stop running until he reaches Virginia, 600 miles away. That's where a sheriff's deputy finds him.
Running away from home was something that I felt that I had to do at the time. I don't fully understand or comprehend that sitting here now.
A couple of interesting things Nathan had on him on his possession when he was found in Virginia. He had $4,000 in cash. That money had been given to him by his grandfather, but he also had a couple of photos of his horse, Cruz. And he had a Ziploc bag with some of the horse's hair in it.
His parents drive all night to Virginia to bring Nathan home.
Clark Carmen told me that Nathan had fled to a horse farm, or that's where he was supposed to be going, in Florida, because Nathan had told his father that that was a place that he could feel normal.
Nathan is diagnosed with Asperger's, which we now know as autism spectrum disorder. Social interactions and communication skills can be challenging.
I'm not someone who understands relationships or who's good about talking about emotions.
But Nathan does share a close relationship with his grandfather, John Chocolos, a wealthy real estate developer who made his fortune in the nursing home business.
My dad had 5 sisters and 4 daughters, and then he had his first grandchild. That I think Linda was really excited that she had a boy to bring into my dad's life.
And then Nathan comes along, and he's your uncle's first grandchild. He doted on him.
Right.
How excited was he to have a grandson?
I mean, there's not really even words for it. He had such great hopes for that kid.
Tell me about the daughters in the family.
I think they were all different individuals. Elaine was the oldest. The next one down was Linda. She was more like John personality-wise. Charlene is the next one down. Valerie's the youngest. I think she was kind of like the apple of John's eye.
My grandfather was the closest person to me. He was like a father to me, and I know I was like a son to him.
When it comes to business, Nathan, a teenager, has a pretty unusual role at his grandfather's company, one that requires him to look and listen closely.
John Chocolos brought Nathan to all of his business dealings because John Chocolos was hard of hearing, and Nathan was his both eyes and ears at every business meeting. They would consult each other after the business meetings were completed. So I think that, John Chocolos was grooming Nathan to take over the family business.
I got the feeling that John had a very good relationship with him and was trying to cultivate that. Nathan was as introverted as John was extroverted, I think.
What was his relationship like as Nathan is growing up? You said there weren't enough words.
He kind of treated him the same way that he treated me when I was a kid. He couldn't do enough for him. The only problem with it is that John always looked at a problem. If there's a problem, if you throw enough money at it, it's going to solve it.
John Chocolos doted on Nathan, gave him anything he wanted, whether it was a credit card or a new truck or a new apartment. There was nothing that Nathan needed because John was always there with his checkbook or his credit card to give Nathan anything he wanted. With
a support system like his granddad, Nathan's future could be limitless. until one phone call changes everything.
Oh my God! Oh my God! The front door was locked. Oh my God!
Fatima 45.
Oh my God! I don't even know what to do. I don't even know where to look.
Windsor, Connecticut, a typical small town. Pretty nice community. You know, not a lot of crime. Murders in Windsor are very rare.
Not rare enough for the man living on Overlook Drive. John Chokalos was a self-made man here in Windsor, Connecticut, running his multi-million-dollar real estate business out of his modest home. That is until the morning of December 20th, 2013. Police arrive here after getting an urgent 911 call.
Okay, what's the emergency?
I came to check on my father to pick him up for an activity. He is in bed and someone shot him in the head.
Is he still alive?
I don't think so. I walked into the bedroom and there's blood all over the back wall.
When I saw the news and my dad being brought out, you know, in a body bag and them saying it was a murder, and I lost it. I lost it. I fell to the floor and I'm crying hysterically.
My name is Scott McGregor. In 2013, I was a detective for the Windsor Police Department. Mr. Chokalos was found in a bedroom on the upper part of the house. In his bed, we found him that he had been shot 3 times.
The scene says a lot to the detective, not for what's in the house, but for what isn't.
You obviously start looking for evidence, and when you can't find spent shell casings, once again, you go back to whoever did this, you know, took the time to retrieve those casings and not leave evidence behind. That kind of tells us that the person planned this out, knew to cover their steps, which ultimately makes our investigation harder.
Sergeant Chris McKee also gets the call to head to Overlook Drive, a quiet street with a quiet resident who wasn't exactly well known around town. How did he fit into the community in terms of how he had accumulated his wealth? Was he kind of like a little local success story?
I gotta say, he ran in his circles and his business circles. He wasn't known in Windsor, you know, and I was very active in community roles in the department, and like I said, I wasn't aware of him until this investigation.
McKee walks into a bloody scene. You're looking around the room. Do you remember what you noticed?
A little further down from Mr. Chokalos' bedroom, there was a glass door, or a door with glass panes that led into the backyard. The officer and I observed that there was broken glass.
A break-in?
Well, it looked like it was meant to be a break-in, but looking at it, it was very clear that the glass had been punched from the wrong side, and it was very suspicious. First thing I thought is this crime scene is staged.
The recently widowed victim was known to keep cash in his house, but after the shots were fired, the gunman left. The money still there. Was there any sense that it had been ransacked or robbed?
There had been large sums of money in the house and other valuables, and honestly, nothing appeared touched. It told me that this was personal.
The devastated family speaks out on local news, hoping to catch a killer.
My father, while he lived a small life, he was a very large man. And to know him, you could never forget him.
Anyone could have done this.
This person killed at least once that we know of. This person's gotten away with murder. And chances are it will happen again.
When we start any murder investigation, we want to do a timeline. We want to start trying to find out who was with John.
My father, my mother passed November 21st.
my father for 2 weeks was staying with one of us, or Linda was staying at my father's house.
Another curious thing about the home, it doesn't exactly look like a millionaire lives there. One of the victim's daughters explains why.
My father has an elaborate estate. I mean, the man's worth at least $40 to $50 million. I mean, it's huge. You wouldn't know it going into the house. That's the only reason why I'm bringing up my father's financial worth. Is because looking at this house, you would not know that he has a 25,000 square foot house up in New Hampshire.
You find out that this is a prominent businessman, a wealthy businessman.
Yep.
What does that say to you initially about this?
Kind of starts to focus investigators in on, was this financially motivated? Did someone have, this gentleman had a lot of money, a lot of properties, did someone have something to gain financially from his death?
The videos of the Windsor police interviewing various family members have never been broadcast before.
Nathan and I went fishing. We went out of Point Judith, Rhode Island.
Okay.
So we went on a cod trip that left at 6 in the morning, got back into port at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
A long day.
We learned that John, the day before, the last person to see him was his grandson, Nathan Carmen. We learned that through talking to Nathan, talking to family.
Hey Nathan, what's your last name? My last name is spelled C-A-R-M-A-N.
We have to treat everyone as a possible suspect. Family, associates, people who worked in the office, neighbors, anything. Anyone could have done this.
Investigators asked Nathan about employees at Chocolos's company, and the grandson mentions one who, he says, complains about being overworked and underpaid.
Just that I'm underpaid, also the stress load. I have 101 things to do. I have to get all these papers in. Now you're asking me to do this and the other thing. So he would bitch and moan about that.
The bookkeeper is, in fact, stealing from the Chocolos's company.
So obviously he's someone we want to talk to.
Nathan begins outlining his final evening with his grandfather to investigators. It begins with dinner. He was going to come here and eat that night with Nathan.
That was the plan, and he wanted me to come too. Yeah. And, I said, look, you guys go do it. If I only knew what I knew, now.
After their meal, Nathan and his grandfather return to the Windsor home. At some point, John Chocolos gets a phone call and puts it on speaker.
I think that there's a real possibility that the person who called him may have been a mistress. I don't like saying that my grandfather was doing that, but I think there's that real possibility.
It wasn't one of your aunts?
No, it was not one of my aunts. It was not one of my aunts, no one in the family. Very young, like 20, 30. And he then told that female voice to just wait. Hold on a second. He showed me to the door.
Nathan Carmen is correct. There is a young woman Chocolos has been talking to.
And she became a suspect. Did you go anywhere else that night or anything like that? Or did you just stay home?
No, I didn't sleep because I was where I had to be at. I was supposed to be at meet my mom at 3 o'clock. When I fall asleep, I have difficulty waking up. So I tried to stay awake. I did run out to Stop and Shop, and I got some ice cream for myself. I picked up a few AAA batteries because I was out of them, and then I headed home. Then I stayed until I went back out to meet my mom.
Investigators don't have much to go on, with the exception of some security camera footage, which they used to retrace the last days of John Chocolos's life. Like this casino video, where the 87-year-old is seen with a much younger woman. Will it provide investigators with answers? The Windsor Police Department may not know who killed John Chocolos yet, but they are beginning to understand who did not. Remember the woman Nathan heard on the phone? And the woman at the casino? They are one and the same.
So John Chocolos struck up a relationship with a 25-year-old woman. over the course of a year.
She was an acquaintance of John who was going to the casino, staying overnight. The night of the homicide, she confirmed that she had talked to John, but she was kind of quickly dismissed as being involved.
Investigators have also tracked down that bookkeeper Nathan mentioned. His name is William Sati, and he too is cleared.
He had an alibi that night and was confirmed. I think he was actually out of the state at the time. I think we found him in Rhode Island.
While cleared as a suspect in the murder, Sati was later convicted of stealing some $400,000 from Chocolus' company.
But that's small change compared to the money the patriarch was handing over to family members every year.
One of the problem children was Linda. Linda was taking John's allowances and going off on spending sprees at casinos or going skiing or taking these lavish trips around the world.
Linda always felt that she deserved more than what she was getting. I don't know why she felt that way. I don't know, because she and my dad were always butting heads.
Father and daughter also butt heads over the way Nathan is being raised.
The relationship between John and Linda was always volatile, but one day it turned violent. And that was over Nathan's care. Nathan was put into a psychiatric hospital shortly after his horse, Cruz, had died. And the accusations begin to fly. Linda accuses John of smothering her son with all sorts of riches, and John is yelling at Linda, saying that she is a bad mother and that Nathan is normal and that Nathan should be treated as such. And at one point, John reaches across the table and grabs Linda by the hair and starts to pull it. So Linda swings and she starts to fight back at her father. And it's a combustible moment that probably lasted a minute plus. And they're swinging at each other, they're fighting each other, and the orderlies are summoned as well as the local police, and Linda is arrested right on the spot.
Linda chalks it up as two people cut from the same cloth.
I don't back down from my father. Yeah.
And that's just his personality not to back down.
Yeah,
Sure.
and it's not his personality to back down either. So if anyone would have fought with him, you know, it would have been me.
Linda has spent many more years fighting to protect her son from those who might treat him unkindly.
I know he led a very lonely life. It's at the age where kids were being invited to birthday parties and, having play dates. And nobody was calling for Nathan to go to the birthday party. And, it was sad. And she hated that for her child. Any mother would hate it if her child wasn't included in anything. But yeah, it must have been hard for Linda not being able to fix that. Linda was a fixer. Linda had to fix things, or at least try to fix things, and she just could not fix that.
Linda and Nathan had a very unique and conflicted relationship. Nathan saw his mother as somebody who was incredibly domineering, and Linda was always trying to get him the therapy that she thought he needed. And I think Nathan wanted to get as far away from his mother as possible because Nathan didn't want to feel different from anybody else.
And with his grandfather, Nathan feels like a success. He learns about business, he's a confidant to John Chocolos, his college tuition is paid for, and so is the rent on his apartment and his credit card bills. Linda couldn't compete with that.
I think what it comes down to is Nathan's always felt torn between me and my father.
Picking sides.
Like he had to pick a side.
How's your relationship in general to your mother?
I did move out of our house, and when we were not on good terms, but I since started speaking to her again. Probably about a year ago.
Did that concern you at all in terms of looking at him as a suspect, that maybe he might exhibit behavior that you wouldn't normally see, but he does have a disorder?
That was a concern of many of us, are the behaviors we're seeing, are the answers he's giving in that one interview that he did grant, are these more aligned with behaviors perhaps of someone who is on the autism spectrum? Or can we look at these for what we normally would kind of think This is kind of sketchy, a little suspicious. We want to delve more into this.
Was your grandpa involved during that time?
Yes, my grandpa. He facilitated financially my ability to go off on her.
So for Linda, the recent fishing trips are a way of pulling her son back into her life. But now there's the murder of her father to deal with and lots of money at stake. Everybody is under the microscope.
Do you own any weapons?
No.
Anybody else in the family own any weapons?
No.
Anybody have access to any weapons? Anybody that knows anybody that has weapons? Nothing at all. Okay. So we've got no weapons, we've got no enemies we know of.
That we know of.
Do you own any firearms?
I do have an air gun. Okay. I'm not sure if that counts as a firearm, but
is it the only?
Yes, it is.
But after speaking with a long line of friends, family, and business associates, investigators are about to realize they've been lied to. In the wake of 87-year-old John Chocolos's brutal murder, investigators have few leads, with one notable exception: fragments of the bullets fired at the victim. There's hope that they could be traced back to a possible murder weapon. What kind of weapon was used to kill him?
It was believed to be a rifle because it was a .308 cartridge, a certain type of bullet.
And a ballistics test concludes the gun used was most likely a Sig Sauer rifle, like this one.
But in the wake of the Newtown massacre, these types of weapons were illegal to own in Connecticut, where Chocolos was murdered.
The detectives focused a lot of their attention on New Hampshire. They scoured gun dealers, I think well over 600 gun dealers, looking for that Sig Sauer rifle.
Eventually, investigators make their way to a place called Shooter's Outpost and speak with salesman Jed Warner about recent purchases. He remembers an interaction with a customer just weeks earlier.
He definitely stood out because he looked like he came off like a construction site. His pants were dirty. He was wearing like a pair of like dirty boots, like a construction feel about him. We started talking about rifles and targeting. He said, actually, I'm very interested in the Sig Sauer 716.
It's an expensive rifle, retailing for almost $2,000. Jed says he suggested other options that were more economical for target shooting, but the buyer knows what he wants.
We do all the paperwork, do the background, he passes. He just kind of walked straight out, and that was the last we saw of him. 2 officers from the Windsor area were there, and then a local, like a Connecticut ATF agent. We had to like go through all the stuff, try to figure out the day of sale.
And there they find it, a bill of sale for a Sig Sauer rifle. The name of the purchaser, Nathan Carmen.
And that became an incredible aha moment for investigators and potentially the smoking gun in this case.
After the discovery at Shooter's Outpost, Nathan is asked again about owning any guns.
And since, because I just wasn't feeling safe at home, I did buy a shotgun.
You did buy a shotgun?
That's correct.
Any other purchases of a firearm anytime?
No.
And that wasn't ever volunteered or brought up until investigators found this out-of-state bill of sale and then confronted Nathan with it.
And how did he respond?
Well, he acknowledged that he had bought this weapon. When asked about it, he said he lost it. And he didn't know where the gun was.
That had to be really a red flag for you all.
It was.
Most people don't lose those firearms or any firearm. But yeah, you don't normally hear, I don't know where it is.
And there was no report of him, making a report that it was stolen, lost, etc.
So what are you thinking at this point? You've been kind of connecting these dots.
Well, it gets better. There was at least 1 hour of unaccounted time during which Mr. Chocolos was shot that Nathan couldn't account for his time.
Linda arrives at this Home Depot parking lot at 3 a.m., where she and Nathan are set to meet up to go fishing. But Nathan is nowhere to be found.
You left your house on about 3. And we know you got to Glastonbury, based on your own words, on or about 4. Why would it take an hour to travel, and I'm guessing 20-something miles, at the rate of 65 miles an hour? It's just mathematically not possible.
On or around 3, about 3.
So
perhaps after.
But this security footage taken outside Nathan's apartment complex shows him leaving at 2:57 a.m. Linda tries calling her son 3 times, but his phone appears to be turned off. He finally calls her back at 4:01 a.m. Did you think you were closing in on an arrest?
I thought so. Yes.
I have to ask you straight up, were you involved in your grandfather's death? Did you?
Absolutely not. No.
But that potential smoking gun, the Sig Sauer rifle, is still missing. Despite a months-long extensive search of Nathan's apartment, the Chocolose estate, and surrounding areas for that crucial piece of evidence, it's nowhere to be found.
And I think that's exactly what they were pinning their entire case on, was that murder weapon. Had they found it and connected it to Nathan, then Nathan would have been in handcuffs.
And so law enforcement was directed to keep working to try to build the case.
This had to be frustrating.
It just tears at you because, you know, you think you've got it. The family had put up a huge billboard on Interstate 91, you know, and coming and going to work every day, I would see that. I would see Mr. Chocolose's face. I would see, you know, reward money for information.
Even though Nathan is under a cloud of suspicion, he's still a free man, but feels like he's an outcast in his own community now. So he takes a portion of his inheritance that had been given to him by his grandfather, and he leaves the state. He travels to Vermont, and he buys an historic farmhouse, and he also bought a boat.
Nathan buys a 31-foot fishing boat, formerly called the Chicken Pox. He plans another fishing outing with his mom, Linda, who has stood by him throughout all the accusations.
And Linda is very excited about that opportunity, but also very concerned because she knows that her son is not an experienced fisherman or an experienced boater.
Linda tells friends that the plan was to fish off the coast of Block Island and head back the next morning.
She was so concerned that she had a text message conversation with people ashore, and that's a smart thing to do, to let people know what your plans are.
So she went out of the way to give them information in case something happened.
Yes, indeed.
When Linda fails to check in, her friends start to worry.
2 of her best friends reach out to authorities and say, something has happened, we need your help.
At first, we were like, okay, hopefully it's just they're overdue and they're going to come back to shore.
But after several days elapse, authorities search Nathan's home and vehicle and find some alarming items.
We start thinking that he may have intent to either harm himself and his mother or both of them.
How did you get word that something had gone wrong with that?
My cousin Charlene called me and told me that they were missing. And I said, I told her not to go on that boat.
Here is Nathan in a 31-foot aluminum boat with his mother, who's got no experience boating, and he thinks that he's the master fisherman or the master boater. Or does he think this is the perfect place to kill his mother? Because in the middle of the ocean, nobody can hear you scream.
But what really happened on that boat? Nathan Carman answers tough questions under oath.
How often did you lie to the Windsor Police Department?
There was one inaccurate.
Staring out at that open water, probably wondering what happened to my mother, or thinking, did I just get away with murder?
His mother is still missing and feared dead.
And the question becomes, what happened? Everybody wants to know what happened.
I didn't know if she had been dragged down with the ship Neither of us had been wearing life vests.
The media coverage was huge.
I'm just asking you to defend yourself against these people who are saying that you did something to your boat that would make it sink.
Yeah, we're done for this evening, period.
He was shooting himself in the foot on national TV.
It is absolutely unfair for the police to use the tragedy that happened to my mother and I as an opportunity to try to nail me for a murder that I didn't commit.
Nathan's grandfather, John Chocolus, had been shot to death 3 years prior to the disappearance of Linda Carmen. And once those connections were made, the story amplified.
You were convinced that Nathan had killed his grandfather.
Correct.
And now you're convinced that he killed his own mother?
It's a story about greed and heartless brutality.
Mr. Chocolus was found in a bedroom on the upper part of the house, in his bed, shot several times in the head. We have to treat everyone as a possible suspect. Anyone could have done this.
But my sisters had told me they suspected Nathan. And that just totally blew me out of the water.
The daughters of John Chocolus got very angry that there was really nothing happening with the case. They couldn't find the murder weapon. They hadn't arrested Nathan Carmen.
And it's just getting wilder and wilder.
Could a family be this burdened to have a second catastrophic event? I didn't know. This is slowly starting to move from a missing persons case to something other than a missing persons case.
It's been 3 years since John Chocolos's murder, with no charges ever filed. Now, the family is facing yet another tragedy as Chocolos's grandson, Nathan Carmen's boat sinks on a fishing trip, with Nathan's mom, Linda, missing and presumed drowned. We're going to head out on a ride on the open water to get a better idea of what happened out here. I met up with Dave Farrell, a maritime lawyer for Nathan's boat insurers. So let's pick up with when the Coast Guard gets involved in this.
They had a lot of vessels out here. They had a lot of aerial searches, and they were really crisscrossing an area that eventually was 64,000 square miles.
That's a big coverage area.
Yeah, the state of Georgia.
And then 2 days later, there's a big shock.
The Orient Lucky finds a life raft 106 miles south of Martha's Vineyard, and in it is Nathan Carmen alone.
With his crew already snapping pictures and recording video, the ship's captain is alerted to a life raft in the water.
After spotting Nathan Carmen and his life raft at sea, I sounded the alarm for our crew to prepare for the rescue efforts, and we were ready to rescue him.
They threw him a life ring, and he grabbed it with his hands. He got dragged up toward the hull of the ship. He was able to push off the side of the ship with his outstretched hand, and he was able to climb up the gangway.
He got onto the ladder. We pulled the ladder up on board.
When Nathan gets aboard the Orient Lucky, the kid looked like Aquaman. There was no physical distress in his well-being. He wasn't dehydrated. He was not hypothermic.
The captain of the Orient Lucky doesn't see anything wrong with him. This is astounding.
I got the call from my supervisor that he'd been located and recovered. I was shocked, and I was thankful. I was happy that there was a survivor, but it was also concerning because Linda hadn't been recovered.
When I found out that, Linda was lost at sea and, I knew she wasn't coming back, it was just, I just had flashbacks of us growing up and just, the good times that we did have. And then, of course, the guilt and the regret that I had of how I treated her in the end. You just don't think that you're going to lose somebody so suddenly like that.
We receive a call from the Coast Guard that Nathan was picked up by a merchant vessel in the shipping lanes in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. First thing you say is, okay, where's Linda? Linda's not with him, just Nathan.
Back on land, with his lawyer present, Nathan's interviewed by Alfred Bucco, an investigator with the South Kingston, Rhode Island Police Department. This audio's never been broadcast before.
I just went in there and said, Nathan, tell me what happened.
We went out to Block Canyon. It was light, but the sun wasn't over the horizon yet. And we started trolling. Okay. And I heard strange noise coming from the engine compartment. So I opened up the hatch in front of the pilot house, and I saw that there was a lot of water in the bilge.
He went and shut down the engine and moved aft to where his mother was.
He said he told his mom to reel in the lines. How did he describe what was happening with the commotion?
He said to his mother only one thing during this calamity, and it was reel in the lines. And she said only one thing in return, okay, I will. At that point, he went up into the wheelhouse, and he says that he started moving emergency gear up to the bow. He wasn't quite ready to abandon ship, but he wanted to be ready.
I didn't realize we were sinking.
Okay.
I knew there was water in the bilge. I knew there was a lot of water because it was already up to that level. Just why I wanted to bring the safety stuff as a precaution. Okay. But I thought I was going to find the problem and fix it.
The third time that he's been in the wheelhouse and failed to radio, he's walking forward to the bow, and all of a sudden, in a split second, the boat sinks.
Boats don't sink that fast.
No. And it sank quickly, like immediately it was out of sight. And that's how he says he never saw his mother again.
He calls for his mother throughout the rest of the day. And he said upon nightfall, he gave up trying to search for her, and he went to sleep and then drifted through the Atlantic Ocean until he was located. So let's get back to your mother. You talk to her, all the time. You go out fishing twice a week. How would you describe, your relationship with her? Is it good?
I don't see the relevance to this particular incident here.
Yeah, I concur.
I think this interview's over. Thank you, though.
After the interview is over, from our perspective, we're like, okay, this isn't just a missing persons investigation. We may be dealing with maybe a homicide.
Captain Hengdong observed Nathan walking the deck of the Orient Lucky for hours at a time by himself, staring out at that open water, probably wondering what happened to my mother, or thinking, did I just get away with murder?
And soon, the whole world will hear from Nathan Carman in his own words.
She'd always been kind of reluctant about safety. I guess she had good reason to be.
New developments in that mystery at sea. Rescued after 8 days in a life raft, searchers had given up.
Nathan Carman and his mother went fishing last week. He survived the ordeal, but his mother didn't make it.
Now authorities are trying to figure out what happened.
The media coverage was huge. This was a story that made headlines around the country.
Initially, Nathan avoids the media, but eventually agrees to an interview with then ABC News correspondent Lindsay Janis in 2017. At his suggestion, they meet at a park near his home.
So take me through that evening. You met at the marina in Rhode Island, and then what?
We met at the marina in Rhode Island, and we had bait, which we got on board. And as we were heading out into the harbor, I had asked her a couple times in the past, will you go to the canyons with me? And she'd always been kind of reluctant about safety, and I guess she had good reason to be.
While Nathan and Linda were still missing and the Coast Guard scouring the Atlantic, investigators back on land began searching through their vehicles here at this marina, looking for clues that might help in the search.
It looked like he had been somewhat almost living out of his truck or sleeping in his truck. We found some receipts from different marine stores.
Items purchased at area marinas in the hours before the fateful voyage included a rock-type anchor that would never have worked for Nathan's boat. And then some lengths of chain. They were curious purchases.
But there was also a bucket of eels that was in Nathan's truck. That stood out to me because eels are often used as bait when fishing for striped bass. And if you left the dock and didn't take your bait, what are you using for bait if you're going fishing?
Nathan tells us the same story he told police, that his mom had been concerned about safety ahead of the boat trip.
And I want to stress that it wasn't an argument, because I want to stress that it was not an argument. She had always been kind of skittish. We're stopping right here with that question.
Oh, okay. But why not reach out for help? The Coast Guard said there was no Mayday call.
I had a radio, and there was also an EPIRB, which is an emergency position indicating radio beacon, on the boat, like someone needs to be medevaced, or when you know you're sinking. But I didn't know that we were sinking until we sank.
Nathan said that there was a lot of commotion going on and the water was being taken on in here. So where would his mom have been when all of this is happening?
Right where you are.
So she would have been right back in this area?
Yes.
But they're not speaking? I mean, and she doesn't know that they're going down?
Nathan has excellent line of sight on her the whole time, and yet he says he never saw her afterwards.
At that point, I didn't know if she had been dragged down with the ship, because neither of us had been wearing life vests. I assumed that if she had been on the surface, that she would have been calling out to me and I would have been able to find her.
According to Nathan, days go by and he huddles on the life raft, keeping a lookout for rescuers.
I was looking out at the horizon for other ships or for helicopters when conditions were good. When the waves were high, because they got to like 13 feet and they were breaking waves at a few points, a few days.
It must have been terrifying.
Yes.
But to some, Nathan's claim of drifting for over a week in rough seas before being rescued defies belief.
The initial videos showing this guy walking up the gangway of the ship without any great problem. He seemed to be just fine.
You would be in dire straits after, 5 or 6 days.
If you laid on that couch for 8 days and you got up to go to the bathroom, your legs would be wobbly because you haven't used them.
At the same time that Nathan and Linda's vehicles were searched at the docks, police in Vermont were conducting a search of Nathan's house, which was under construction.
The investigators find, modems, SIM cards, a few other things. The one thing they don't find is a computer. Whatever computer he was using to conduct his online purchases has disappeared.
Another item that was seized during the search was a lengthy letter that Nathan had written to an unknown priest that described his relationship and his view of his mother.
My mother's bullying, calling me a quitter, a stuck-up snob who thinks he is a king, and a piece of basically characterized my childhood. One night, though, I went to bed imagining myself as essentially a master of my own hell, joying in inflicting grave bodily suffering on other people. So, yeah.
After his interview with Alfred Bucco, Nathan has all but stopped talking to the police and is never questioned about the letter or his missing computer. Reporter Lindsay Janis is one of the few people he is willing to talk to.
I know I wasn't responsible for anything that resulted from the boat sinking. I know I wasn't responsible for my mom's death.
You were convinced that Nathan had killed his grandfather.
Correct.
And now you're convinced that he killed his own mother?
Yes.
That's pretty dark stuff. If the interview hadn't already made Nathan's story seem a little fishy, the follow-up was even more eye-opening.
I did not cause my mother's death. We're done here this evening.
If you have nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem answering the questions.
Oh, hi, Dave. Nice to meet you. Hi, how are you?
I'm Matt. Nice
hi,
to meet you.
Matt, nice to meet you, Matt. Thanks so much for taking us out. Initially, when everybody else was scratching their heads and wondering, wow, this poor guy, what happened to his mom? For the average person out there who's looking at this and taking it at face value, folks who know the water, like you do, had your doubts.
Absolutely. People had doubts about this story from the beginning.
With Linda Carmen presumed lost at sea, her reportedly tumultuous relationship with her son Nathan was under renewed scrutiny. He sits down with 2020 for a second interview, which now holds new significance.
If someone said that you did not get along with your mother, that you did not like her, is there any truth to that at all?
No, there's not any truth to that. Our relationship had grown from where it had been. We did have a challenging relationship at one point in my life, but she was the closest person in the world to me after my grandfather passed.
Will you inherit all of what your mother had?
That's something that I can't comment on at this time.
But unbeknownst to Nathan, his mom has decided not to leave him any inheritance. She even records a video message obtained exclusively by 2020 explaining that he won't be getting her house.
Hey, big guy, I guess if you're watching this, you're watching this. I want to explain why I did what I did and why my will is stated the way it is. I feel that when you moved out, you took everything that was of value to you and everything you wanted. That's my feeling.
And in her written last will and testament, dated 3 years before she disappeared, Linda explicitly excludes Nathan as a beneficiary.
By now, more details of John Chocolos's death and the subsequent investigation have risen to the surface.
Initially, the media was unaware that Nathan's grandfather, John Chocolos, had been shot to death in his bed 3 years prior to the disappearance of Linda Carmen. And once those connections were made, the story amplified. It wasn't a bittersweet rescue story anymore. It was something potentially much more devious.
So, at what point in your life would you say that you became really close with your grandfather?
Here's where I have a bit of an issue. My understanding was we were going to be sitting down and we were going to be talking about
yeah, the raft is my next bit, but we did explain that we need to hear about your whole life leading up to this incident. How can people know who Nathan is if we don't tell them? What was your relationship like with your grandfather?
I'm not talking about my relationship with my grandfather or with if you want to ask me any more questions on that line, we're done here.
Can you tell me more about what your grandfather did? He was a big figure in this part of the country.
That's not what this interview is about.
He gets really defensive if people pry a little bit too much. And the way that he shut her off on so many questions and wouldn't cooperate, he was shooting himself in the foot on national TV.
Since we spoke a week ago, there's been a lot of speculation. People are suspicious of you. What do you want to say to those people who are saying something about his story that just isn't adding up?
I'm not aware that those people exist.
There are suspicions about the boat trip. Since we last got together a week ago,
I've said the way it happened.
I'm just asking you to defend yourself against these people who are saying that you did something to your boat that would make it sink.
That's not true.
Nathan had never been interviewed at length by a network or by a reporter, so this was something new to Nathan, and I think Nathan thought it was going to go one way when it certainly went another way.
Was there an issue with the boat that needed to be fixed?
No, there were. We're done.
Nathan, I'm trying to give you an opportunity to speak out against these allegations that have been made.
The only way that I can speak out against them is to say what actually happened, and that's what I've been trying to do.
Another thing that's happened since we last got together, police searched your mom's home.
Yeah,
did you know anything about that?
We're done for this evening period. We're done here.
We're not trying to make you uncomfortable. We're trying to give you an opportunity to answer some of these allegations.
We're done here this evening.
If you have nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem answering the questions.
He walked out. He walked out of the interview, only to come back.
Police never arrested you for the murder of your grandfather. Do you think it is unfair that people are bringing that up and talking about that now?
It is absolutely unfair for the police to use the tragedy that happened to my mother and I as an opportunity to try to nail me for a murder that I didn't commit.
Can you understand when people see that you were the last person to see two people alive? They see that and they say you are either the most unlucky man alive or you had something to do with those two deaths. What do you say to that?
I say that there's no relationship.
Later that month, Nathan holds a memorial service for his mom. It's sparsely attended by some of her friends. Linda's sisters are notably absent.
Now, Linda hasn't even been declared dead yet. Nobody in his family is willing to go because many of us in his family believe that Nathan is truly the culprit.
I'm very grateful to the friends and family who attended in memory of my mom.
Nathan, you've been through so much. How have you been these last several weeks?
It's been very difficult.
We had no boat. We had no body. But as in any investigation, there's always evidence that can be recovered. It's just a matter of making sure that you know where to look.
There's all hands on deck at that point to try to uncover the truth.
As with the death of John Chocolos, according to investigators, there isn't enough evidence to charge Nathan with a crime. But in a twist of fate, a seemingly innocuous insurance claim for the sunken boat is about to take the saga of Nathan Carman in an unexpected direction.
Some of these strange occurrences maybe could be chalked up to an inexperienced fisherman, a guy who's panicking.
You know, I spent a lot of time with Nathan. I think he was cold, calculating, and had this whole story planned out to explain the disappearance of his mother and the sinking of the vessel.
The idea that he drifted for a week in that life raft just didn't hold water for you?
Not even for a second.
The Nathan Carman case was incredibly explosive. A young man is plucked out of the ocean. That just conjures up all of these images of, say, Tom Hanks in Castaway.
Author Casey Sherman has spent the last 2.5 years researching the case for his new book, Blood in the Water.
The story is so complex and it has so many layers to it. Not only do you have one potential murder, but it's the story about a family and how wealth can corrupt.
As investigators continue digging into Nathan Carman's story of being lost at sea, he takes action, filing an insurance claim for $85,000 to recoup the loss of his boat, the chickenpox.
It happened very promptly, and that indicated to me that this guy's really serious.
The insurance company is not going to pay Nathan. In fact, they are going to take Nathan to court. Nathan also didn't back down.
We filed our suit to deny insurance coverage. We were in for a fight. We came away with the distinct impression that almost everything he said to us was a lie. There were holes in every aspect of his story.
Holes in his story and his boat. Here at this marina where Nathan's odyssey began, fellow boaters noticed odd behavior in him the day before that fateful trip.
It kind of caught my eye when I saw him leaning over the back and drilling 2 holes in the transom of the boat. I asked him, "What are you doing?" That's why he told me, he says, He's taking the trim tabs off.
Trim tabs are stabilization devices that help lift the boat up higher on the water. Nathan admits to removing them, leaving holes in his boat, but says he patched them up with a marine putty.
I patched the holes. They seemed to be well patched. And at the time my mom and I went out, I felt that one, I knew those holes were above the water line, and two, I felt that they were securely patched.
The idea that he was patching up those holes, that putty, the patching didn't work?
It wouldn't work. My theory is that he was trying to make it look like he was deliberately altering the boat in a dangerous fashion.
So that maybe it looked like he made a mistake.
He's very calculating. He wanted people to be able to point to, oh, no wonder the boat sank.
Attorney Dave Farrell represented Nathan's boat insurance companies and has looked into Nathan's account of what happened for years. Nathan's story is that his boat started taking on water, but he failed to put out a distress call because he didn't think the boat was sinking. One would think then maybe he would call out for help, the Mayday situation, right? Did he do that?
No, and he had ample opportunity, because each of the times that he went into the wheelhouse to carry gear forward, he was within arm's length of the microphone for his VHF radio, and a good one.
This is where the emergency equipment is, right? Here?
Yeah, right here. A microphone within arm's reach. And he came in here 3 times to get survival gear and bring it up to the bow. So he was within arm's length 3 times he could have picked it up.
All of these things sound pretty odd. Maybe you can chalk them up to panic and inexperienced fishermen, but you would have to have hard evidence to really show that he wasn't where he should have been.
I got an oceanographer to assess whether it was possible for him to drift in a life raft to where the Orient Lucky picked him up 7 days later.
And was it?
Absolutely impossible. Physically impossible.
I looked at drifting buoys, I looked at historical data, I looked at thermal images of the Gulf Stream rings. All of these different systems showed the currents going westward, and Nathan claimed he drifted eastward. And that did not make any sense.
And Nathan's aunts aren't buying his alleged fish tales either.
New twist to the story making national headlines involving Nathan Carman.
They file what is known as a Slayer petition, which prevents a person from inheriting property from someone they murdered.
Nathan Carman's aunts do not want him to inherit that money, and they say essentially profit off of 2 deaths they believe he caused.
When Nathan walks into court, he's actually got a suit, and he's cleaned up, he's shaven.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Nathan Carman appearing on my own behalf.
He looks like a young, aspiring law student.
The loss of my mom has been extremely difficult for me, so I can sympathize with petitioners in that respect.
He ended up taking depositions. He ended up going into court and arguing motions.
I'll say that some of the petitioners had awfully substantial motive. And I had very, very little.
He ended up putting up his own defense.
You saw him sort of tell the truth the whole time.
But in this deposition obtained by 2020, it's Nathan in the hot seat.
This is the deposition of Nathan Carman.
Did you have a close relationship with your mother, Linda Carman?
I would say that I did, yes.
When asked to respond to claims that he lied to police during their interviews with him in 2013, Nathan clams up.
How often did you lie to the Windsor Police Department?
There was one inaccurate. I'm pleading the 5th.
Pleading the 5th as to lying to the Windsor Police Department after your grandfather is dead.
That's
what
correct?
he said. Okay.
Nathan pleads the 5th 81 times during this deposition.
I plead the 5th. I plead the 5th. I plead the 5th. And I plead the 5th.
Meaning he declines to answer questions to avoid potentially incriminating himself.
I plead the 5th.
That's damaging to Nathan, I think, in the public's mind. Who takes the 5th? You know, mobsters take the 5th. Gang lords take the 5th. Not somebody that's completely innocent.
Nathan Carman caught a legal break today after a judge tossed out the lawsuit his aunts had filed to keep him from collecting millions of dollars from his grandfather's estate.
The judge dismisses the case after he rules John Chocolose wasn't a resident of New Hampshire.
The newspapers reported it as a tremendous win for Nathan. I wasn't too troubled by it.
Nathan is off the hook for his family lawsuit, but his insurance case is looming, and investigators have him in their sight.
Pieces of the puzzle had started to come together.
There were too many inconsistencies.
There's no such thing as a perfect crime.
Nathan Carman and his insurer head to court in Providence, Rhode Island, battling it out in what would be Nathan's biggest legal challenge yet.
Was Nathan at fault for the sinking of his boat, or was he owed a payday?
Nathan Carman and his lawyer saying absolutely nothing, heading into Providence federal court this morning for the first day of the civil trial against Carman.
He's got everything to lose here. If the court determines that he is negligent in his mother's death, that can open up the potential for criminal charges. Nathan at times was very agitated during the trial, but he was also very active, always leaning over and having conversations with his attorney. And he was right in the thick of things.
He takes the stand, sticking to his story of what happened on that boat. What was he like on the stand?
He is very articulate when he wants to be, very exacting, but also very evasive.
Nathan had no emotion when he testified. That may be because he is on the autism spectrum. And he talked about his mother in a way that she was more of a nuisance than she was a help to him while that boat was going down.
The judge asked him, "What's going on with your mother during all this time?" And Nathan's peculiar answer was, "My mother was part of the problem rather than the solution to a sinking boat."
With the case now in the judge's hands, Nathan talks to the media outside the courthouse.
This isn't about money. It's an $85,000 claim. I almost feel like I have a responsibility to my mom to make sure that the truth comes out.
At the end of the trial, the judge rules that Nathan was negligent with regard to the sinking of the chicken pox.
That was a small victory for me because at least a little bit of justice was prevailing through it all.
The civil case acted as the de facto criminal case. FBI investigators, Coast Guard investigators, attorneys, prosecutors, they all had front row seats.
Now it transitioned to his house in Vermont.
Pieces of the puzzle had started to come together and had started to paint a picture for us that this was in fact a criminal act.
There were too many inconsistencies. There were too many things that just didn't add up.
It became very, very clear that Nathan had committed a crime on the high seas.
We don't have a body, we don't have a boat, so it's a very, very difficult case to try to prove. The grand jurors have to decide, is there enough evidence to proceed and indict?
It took several years, but Nathan Carman is now charged with killing his mother.
Nathan agrees to meet with investigators, but has no clue what's about to happen.
Nathan was surprised when he was advised that he was under arrest for the murder of Linda Carman.
It was like something out of the golden age of piracy. Nathan was charged with murder on the high seas.
According to an indictment, Carman devised a scheme to defraud his grandfather's estate and to obtain money from the trust, and the murders were part of this scheme.
However, the indictment doesn't charge Nathan with the murder of John Chocolose.
Medical records, school records.
Nathan hires defense attorney Marty Manella.
Marty Manella is a long-time, very bulldogged litigator. And when he met Nathan, he not only found a client, but he found a son.
He had literally no support. That was probably the hardest thing that Nathan had to endure, the fact that he had no one. But he had us. He really had us. And I had never in 50 years of practicing law had that kind of relationship with a client. Never.
As he's escorted into federal court for arraignment, cameras catch Nathan defiantly proclaiming his innocence.
Not guilty.
Before pleading not guilty to the court as well.
During Nathan's detention hearing, his aunts read a letter to the judge saying that if you let him go, they would be in fear for their life.
I was very relieved that Nathan was going to be put behind bars. If Nathan was not arrested and not contained, I really think he would have gone on a murder spree.
For years, Nathan had lived in solitude in Vermont. He had never threatened anyone. So to me, it was unusual that they were in fear of what?
The court sides with his aunts and denies Nathan's bail, setting a trial date for October 2nd, 2023. Marty and his team get to work.
It was a huge undertaking, and it was a daily, 7-day-a-week thing. It really became part of our lives.
Nathan was incredibly active in his defense. Every waking hour when he wasn't in his jail cell, he was at the prison library, poring over legal books.
This case was his whole life. He wanted his day in court. He wanted to clear his name.
The day of June 15th, 2023, came as a shock. They were just a few months away from trial.
We've learned Nathan Carman has died while awaiting a trial for his mother's death.
I got a call in the morning. Nathan was gone, and he hung himself. And I just cried.
Nathan took his own life. He wasn't depressed. He wasn't despondent. We were all looking forward to that October date so that we could have this trial.
Despite all the family court battles and accusations, Nathan's aunts come to pay their respects at his funeral.
I attended Nathan's funeral. Myself and my sisters were there. I was very sad.
Nathan's attorney paid for the funeral, paid for his cremation, and then gave his eulogy.
Non-violent and loving young man. Sleep with the angels, my dear friend. It was probably the toughest thing I ever did because it was like losing a family member. It may sound crazy. You lose cases, you lose clients, but you don't have that kind of contact that we had with this person.
I think he is both a victim and a villain in his own story. Nathan Carman remains an enigma.
The criminal charges against Nathan were dismissed. So in the eyes of the law, Nathan is an innocent man still today.
Months after Nathan Carman's funeral, a Connecticut judge officially declares his mom, Linda, deceased 7 years after she disappeared at sea. The Windsor Police Department tells 2020 that John Chocolos's murder case is still active.
What I'd like people to remember about my dad, he was kind, he was loving. He'd give you a hard time, but he always did it out of love. Linda was so kind and generous to her friends and the people around her. And I remember all the good times that Linda and I had.
What do you want people to know and remember about your Uncle John?
He's a guy that did it himself. I mean, I loved that guy, you know, and he loved me.
How much do you miss him all these years later?
Every day. Yep. We went to the cemetery today. Nathan's got a stone there, next to my uncle. Why is he buried there? There's no stone there for my cousin Linda. Where's her stone?
Nathan should be remembered as a troubled soul. I'm happy, I'm relieved that Nathan was buried in the family plot next to my dad. Nathan, the child, belongs where he is. He needs to rest.
That's our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Deborah Roberts.
And I'm David Muir from all of us here at 2020 and ABC News. Good night.
My mother did not like this woman from the minute she walked in her room.
This is not a woman who should have been doing nursing. She did not like the people she dealt with.
And I said to my mum, you've got to complain, Mum. You can't have this nurse doing this.
The effect of those complaints is to have terrible consequences for the residents of St. Andrews.
I told you, I know how to commit the perfect murder.
Mum's character, she was a very happy-go-lucky person. However, she did drink like a fish, smoke like a chimney, and if she liked you, she liked you, and if she didn't, she didn't. But she had the warmest heart, and she would give you her shirt off her back, because that's the type of woman that she was. She was a loving, caring mum. I couldn't have asked for another mother on this earth other than the one I had.
Marie Darrow, at age 82, falls in her home and suffers some pretty extensive injuries at that age.
She went out the back, actually, to get some clothes off the line, and she slipped and fell. And she lay there 4 days without anyone knowing.
Her family takes her to the hospital. She goes through a recovery process, but they really decide at that point it's just too much to bring her back home, and she needs to seek professional care outside of home. They're looking around locally, and they find St. Andrews Village, which is a nursing home nearby, and it seems to be a perfect fit for Marie and the family.
The first 6 months, she whinged, complained, and all that sort of thing. She hated it.
It's a big change from her independent lifestyle she once had. However, after several months of this, where she becomes more accustomed to it, her health actually starts improving quite substantially.
She had a great room. She had a beautiful room, room 10, and it overlooked the bowling club. And that's how she watched the bowlers play bowls all day. She was getting better and better and better. And within a year, she was back up to 70 kilos. She was laughing, she was happy, she was smiling. And then she decided she liked St. Andrews. You know, liked the activities, loved the nurses, loved them. And I would ring Mum every morning at 9 o'clock. I would ring her and that to say hello, and we'd sit there.
That's until Megan Haynes is employed as a new member of staff at St. Andrew's Village.
Mum had never complained about any of the nurses. She had a reasonably good life. She was comfortable, she was happy, until Megan Haynes walked through that door.
Megan Haynes was born in South Africa. She grew up during the 1960s apartheid era. This was a very tumultuous time, and she eventually decided that she wanted to leave the country and emigrate to Australia. She did so in 2000, where she decided to register as a nurse.
We don't know what had happened in South Africa. As a person of colour, she would have suffered under the apartheid system. Where her record comes into focus is when she moved to Victoria, and then her problems were more documented.
She worked at a series of nursing homes and different hospitals, essentially just trying to make it in the field as a nurse. She really was starting over, and this was a new life, a new beginning for her. Despite seemingly having this new start in life where she could really be anything and do anything, it seemed that Megan Haynes really started a downward slope almost immediately upon her arrival in Australia.
There were already question marks over her work as a nurse. There were various misconduct charges that showed that she really was not looking after the patients in the way that a nurse should be.
Megan had been fired from several jobs down south in other states.
For anybody to seem so resentful while on the job, it really suggests that they're in the wrong profession, but particularly in a field where caregiving and helping others is the hallmark of the profession.
She was reported for a minor assault of an elderly patient. It's understood that she slapped or pushed a patient at the Caulfield nursing home.
A more serious allegation of misconduct came against Megan Haynes from two different patients.
In this same nursing home, routine blood tests picked up that there was insulin in the systems of two of the patients who shouldn't have had any insulin in their system.
Insulin is a drug that's specifically used for people that have the inability to make insulin themselves naturally. This is something that everybody needs to regulate our blood sugar. But particularly for diabetics, this is something your body cannot do naturally. But for people that are not diabetic, who receive insulin injections, this could be a severe hazard to your health, even causing death.
Suspicion fell on everyone, but the only nurse who was on duty in the ward at the time was Megan Haynes. The drug patients all had jewellery missing from their rooms.
The suspicion held by patients, their families, and law enforcement is that Megan Haynes is stealing jewelry from the elderly patients and then trying to drug them, essentially to cover it up.
And 3 days after the second patient was drugged, police actually searched Haynes' home, but they didn't find any jewellery there. They did, however, find a small amount of cannabis, and Haynes was charged with drug possession over that.
Although the elderly patients had very similar stories and reported that they had both been receiving an overdose of insulin and they had jewelry stolen, because the police had essentially no evidence tying Megan Haynes to either the insulin overdose or the theft of the jewelry, they discontinued the investigation and said there was nothing more that they could do about either.
It's understood that that's because the elderly patients didn't suffer any extreme health impact from it. So it was all sort of washed over and left as it was.
Although the authorities do not have enough evidence to prosecute and charge Megan Haynes with any of the crimes that she's suspected of, they do have enough to take away her medical license or her ability to practice as a nurse. And so she's essentially banned from serving as a nurse in the state of Victoria from that point forward.
When the Health Practitioners Watchdog system moved from a state to a federal system, Haynes applied to have her registration reinstated, and she was successful in this.
Megan Haynes was able to regain her license, and she was able to practice again throughout Australia.
Despite this very checkered history of misconduct.
She played off the problems in Australia of the state system, in that one state would not speak to the other, or at least it certainly didn't go through, so she could move from Victoria, where she had all these things against her, to Ballina in New South Wales.
In 2014, Megan Haynes was able to find new employment, this time at a nursing home called St. Andrew's Village in New South Wales. And that's where she started working as a nurse, this time with a new set of patients.
Nurse, I need help. Oh.
Sort it out yourself, you disgusting old biddy.
Nurse!
But nurse nothing.
We would expect that Megan Haynes would be so much more willing to provide these basic things to her patients, but she made it very clear that she didn't want to.
So one woman had simply asked to go to the toilet and Megan Haynes refused to take her. Another woman wanted some cream rubbed onto her. Megan said to her, "Cover yourself up, you look disgusting." And the third woman said that her foot was hurt as Megan Haynes transported her back to her bed. So these allegations really show that she had very little regard for the people that she was charged for caring for.
When you place your loved ones in there, you expect them to be looked after and loved and not neglected and not hurt and not spoken to like a doormat. She did say to me on the Tuesday morning, "We've got a new nurse and I don't like her," but she was blubbering, she was crying until I, like, "Mum, I can't understand you." And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said to me, "We've got this new night nurse and her name's Megan." she, she'd left me, blah, 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 and she went on telling me about how she'd rung the bell for 40 minutes. She came in and found out that Mum had dirtied herself and told her that she can just lay in it. Dragged her in a cold shower the next morning. Don't tell anyone or I'll kill you.
She did not like the people she dealt with. She obviously didn't. She saw them as demanding, draining, unreasonable, unpleasant. And this clearly leaves no doubt that she should not have been in nursing in the first place.
Although many people try to avoid the night shift for obvious reasons, it's far more difficult on the body. A lot of people don't like sleeping all day and then having to work at night. Curiously, this is what Megan Haynes requested to work. And there are a few different reasons why this may be the case. One is she really didn't want to have to deal with any patients. So she preferred to work while they were sleeping, and essentially she could just do whatever she wanted. Second theory is that she really was hoping to be unsupervised. She didn't want a lot of eyes looking at what she was doing.
Why do you think she wants night shift? Why do you think that she asked for night shift? So that she could thieve without the elderly seeing her, so that she could take their money, their jewellery. My mother is a very, very, very good judge of character. And my mother did not like this woman from the minute she walked in her room.
Incredibly, Megan Haynes has been at St. Andrew's Village as a nurse for just over a week when 3 patients come forward and make their first complaints about her behavior.
Nurse! Nurse!
It's just a smell who calls herself a patient. She can wait.
I need help! I need help! I need
Shut
help!
up! I'll be there in a minute. Now, what was I saying? Oh, yes, tonight. So where are you taking me?
I rang Mum the next day and I said, how was she last night? Well, it was appalling what my mum told me. It was appalling to know that she'd pushed Marjorie, Mum's friend, over. She had walked into Isabel's room and Isabel had rung the bell and she walked in and said, I want to go to the toilet, do a wee. And she turned around and she said, piss in your pad, and walked out. That was on a Tuesday night.
Go back to your room and stay out of my sight.
That woman said something or did something to terrify my mum. And that was what Mum said. She told Mum that she wasn't going to tell anybody or she'd kill her.
Nurse! I need help! I need help!
I said to my mum, you've got to complain, Mum. You can't have this nurse doing this. You've got to complain. And she said, oh, we're all scared. And I said, get everybody together and complain. And she said, I'm so frightened of her. What's she going to do to me if I complain? I said, oh, Mum, what's she going to do, murder you?
The effect of those complaints is to have terrible consequences for the residents of St. Andrews.
Haynes was told about these complaints and she was also told who had made the complaints. She was given the names of the people who had complained about her.
When I phoned her Friday morning, she was so excited because she said, oh, guess what? I did what you told me to do and we've all made the complaints. So here's 4 complaints against this nurse and she's only been there 6 nights. That's it.
After receiving complaints from residents about Megan Haynes, nursing home authorities tell her that they want to meet the next week to have a more thorough discussion about the complaints that have been raised against her.
She was told that she mustn't go into their rooms without another care worker with her. She wasn't allowed to go into the rooms on her own, but she completely disregarded this.
Because of the allegations that have been raised, she realizes that the carer that's supposed to go with her around to any patient's rooms will be watching her every move, and so she concocts a plan where she gets the carer to go to the other side of the nursing home to check on patients.
She sent the carer to another section of the home, and the carer said, oh, but I'm not supposed to go over there until da-da-da-da, whatever time. And she said, I want you to go now. And she said, oh, okay. So this carer went over to the other section to help the other girls, and that was between 11 and 1.
What we know is that sometime between midnight and 1 a.m. the next morning, Megan Haynes did manage to enter 2 of the women's rooms on her own.
It's pretty clear at this point that Megan Haynes is extremely anxious. She is fearful that an investigation into her could lead authorities to uncover what had happened previously in Victoria, where she was serving as a nurse before this. This is now her 2nd attempt at serving as a nurse, and this is about to come crashing down. Megan Haynes comes up with a plan where she could essentially neutralize the patients that raised the complaints, and has an idea that by injecting patients with insulin, she can essentially make it look like they naturally died, but she would no longer have complainants raising concerns against her. The investigation would be dropped and everything would go back to the way it was.
Her superficial motive was to solve a problem. You're complaining about me, I'm going to lose my job. I've got nowhere to go. If I kill you, I've solved the problem. But we can see that this did not just happen then. There's the build-up of issues that went back to her time in Victoria. In other words, for someone like this was becoming more and more a viable way to deal with these issues, to deal with your own rage, to deal with your sense of how dare anyone threaten me, challenge me, put me in a bad situation. And you can use the term overweening arrogance, which was feeding into this belief that people who trouble me, people who cause problems, these patients are going to threaten my career again. I could get sacked, and this time I've probably got nowhere to run to. There's only one way to deal with it.
Megan Haynes thinks she's found a foolproof way to cover up her crimes.
Sometime between midnight and 1 a.m, Megan Haynes was able to enter the rooms of Mari Dara and Isabel Spencer on her own, and she injected both of them with insulin, even though they were not insulin dependent.
And I couldn't believe that somebody could be so evil. Evil.
short time later, she went into the room of the third complainant, and at this time, the woman awoke, so there was no real opportunity for her to inject her with insulin.
She concocted a decoy reason, which was that she was there to administer a painkiller. She administers this drug and then writes it down on the patient's chart. However, she writes down the time as being around 11 p.m. This was clearly not the time that she was there, and it couldn't have been the time that she was there.
She wrote that time down wrong because that was the time that she was doing handover. So she couldn't have possibly been in that room at 11 p.m. So we can see from that she was trying to fudge the facts and shift the focus. She didn't want people to know exactly where she was at the time when the two victims would have been suffering from the effects of the insulin that they'd been given unnecessarily.
This actually turns out to be a very critical piece of evidence later on in the investigation against Megan Haynes. Why would she do this if there was nothing to hide? Insulin can take a bit of time for it to have the lethal effects that Megan had intended. And it turns out that was exactly the case here, where two of the patients that she had injected with insulin were still alive by the morning.
Mum's room was opposite the nurse's station and next door to the medical room. And this carer heard Mum groaning and moaning and everything. And she went to walk in there and Megan Haynes grabbed her and said, don't go in there and disturb Marie. She's just having a nightmare. And they were both standing in the doorway and Megan goes, "You're all right, Marie, go back to sleep." And that was my mum asking for help, trying to tell somebody what had happened. But that witch stopped the carer from going in.
At 6 a.m. that morning, Megan Haynes didn't give Isabella Spencer her necessary dose of antibiotics, and it's understood that that was because she didn't want to raise the alarm about Isabella Spencer's rapidly deteriorating state of health.
Rather than doing anything to counteract the effects, Megan decides that she was just going to leave, go home, and let the medicine take its intended course.
Later that morning, both Ms. Darragh and Ms. Spencer were found in hypoglycemic comas. Staff initially thought that they had suffered from a stroke.
Elderly patients die at rates that are much higher than other patients, meaning that there's fewer eyebrows raised if this does occur, and the investigations that would typically happen if a younger patient died wouldn't happen, meaning it's a lot easier to get away with these types of murders.
It was only when later blood tests revealed the presence of insulin that suspicions were really aroused.
It became clear to the nursing home that what they are looking at is definitely a crime.
When I was contacted to say my mother had had a stroke, I jumped in the car and took off down there, and I got there at 12:10 and I was cuddling her and kissing her and telling her I was bringing her home, and that it wasn't until a detective came in the room and knelt down beside me and said, "I have to leave because it's a crime scene." And I what? And he said, "A crime scene, we need you to go. We've got our fingerprint people here." And I just screamed, Megan Haynes has murdered my mum. I had a feeling. When he said a crime scene, that was all that came to my brain because of Mum complaining, feeling scared, all sorts of things, you know. I just had a feeling.
After police were called in on this case for what was clearly a double murder, there was only one suspect, and that was Megan Haynes. Megan Haynes had been the subject of numerous complaints by nursing home patients, two of which were now dead.
On May the 16th, police searched Megan Haynes' home and confiscated some medication. They also intercepted a phone call between Megan Haynes and a man named Herman. Now, in this phone call to Herman, Megan Haynes says that 2 of the nursing home residents died as a result of being given the wrong medication.
Apparently, the patients were actually given wrong medication.
Now, this isn't something that Megan Haynes could have known, because at that stage, she should have only known that they had died as a result of unknown circumstances.
Yes, to 2 people.
But she had this prior knowledge. She knew that there was something else to it, and that's when suspicions were really aroused.
Megan Haynes becomes an even stronger suspect for these crimes.
The police kept saying to my brother and sister and I, we don't want anything to get out. Do not use Facebook. Do not do this. Do not do that, because we have to catch her. Or not her, we have to catch the person, right?
When police interview Megan's boyfriend, there are interesting things they learn from this. It became clear that Megan had taken no responsibility for her actions in the past. When she was fired from her last nursing position, she blamed everything on other people. She said it was their fault and nothing had to do with her behavior.
Well, he did say to me that every time she was sacked, she would come home and go, I've been sacked, or what, I'm leaving, or whatever. And he'd go, oh, not again, you know, and she'd go, oh, you know, like it's their fault. It's their fault, it's not her fault. And that's what he said to me, that she was always blaming the other person. So she never ever blamed herself.
You like it?
Oh yeah, very pretty. An expensive gift.
Something I got myself, actually. I like to treat myself.
I'm watching this.
Well, if you're interested in that stuff, you should talk to me. I know all about that.
Yeah? What would you know?
How to commit the perfect murder. That's what I know.
They had been watching a crime show when she turned and said, I know how to kill someone. You just have to administer insulin and you can kill them, and there's no trace of it at all. So that's a very damning fact that Megan Haynes actually knew how she could kill elderly people with insulin, and she thought that she could get away with it.
The problem with poison is that it will show up in an autopsy.
You're nuts.
But if you use something a little different, there won't be a trace.
What?
Insulin. That's what. You can shove a bit of insulin in someone and 24 hours later there won't be a trace. Shocked you, have I? I told you. I know how to commit the perfect murder.
Perfect if you're an evil so-and-so.
Maybe that's why you like me so much.
There's certainly a boasting element. It's the same reason they sometimes hang around after somebody's died so they can see the fuss and enjoy the sensation. They do like talking about it. It's a spin-off from the fact that healthcare people need a certain amount of black humour to survive, and this is healthy and reasonable. But people like this take it much further. The other thing to add is there's a particular aura around the use of insulin for murder.
The interesting thing about insulin is that it can be metabolised by the body, and if it's not picked up early enough, there's no trace of it.
Another very attractive reason that insulin is used as a drug of choice in murder is that it's also readily available. Most nursing homes, hospital facilities, all of them carry insulin. There's so much that it's difficult to track. All of this makes it very difficult to trace if it is used.
Insulin, that's what?
I was actually standing over Mum's grave, reading a poem. And my partner and my brother were either side of me because I was shaking, and this man was talking to our sister. I just finished with the poem, and then I just kissed the poem and put it in on top of Mum because it was when Mum was going down, and my partner handed me a rose to do the same. The cask was going down, and my sister turned around and she said, "Excuse me, everybody, I've just been informed that Mum was murdered." And I just remember screaming.
When Megan Haynes was arrested for the murders, it prompted police to reopen the allegations of theft against her. And it was during this time that Megan Haynes was visited by a relative, and apparently she told that relative that she had hidden the jewellery in a very specific location, and she told that relative to go and search for the jewellery, and this was all reported to police. But when police themselves went to her property and tried to search for the jewellery, it had gone. It's never really surfaced exactly where that jewellery was disposed of or how it was disposed of.
Megan Haynes pleads not guilty. This continues a pattern of her not taking responsibility for her actions and essentially denying any responsibility, saying she had nothing to do with it, denying all the facts, and basically saying everybody else was wrong, but she was the one in the right.
Oh my God. Day after day looking at her, this far away from her. She had 3 officers around where she was sitting, and I just glared at her because to me, I'd never been through anything like this, so it was so surreal. And I was still, after 2.5 years, getting my head around that I'm never going to see my mum again, never in life, and I'll never get over it. I'll never get over it.
Sort it out yourself, you disgusting old biddy.
Nurse!
But nurse nothing.
To see her every day sitting there gloating, telling her solicitor and her baron, "Come here, get here," you know, ordering them around and everything, you know, and I just thought to myself, who are you? Who are you?
Megan Haynes showed no real remorse for her crimes.
I need help! I need help!
Without having spoken to Megan, it's difficult to essentially determine her personality. However, there are a few things that shine through that really indicates she had a real difficulty ever taking responsibility for her actions. She always wanted to blame others and seemed to have this entitlement towards what she was doing, including stealing from elderly people, acting out in the way she wanted to, gaining employment as a nurse, but then not wanting to take care of the elderly, things that shows that she was probably bordering on narcissistic level of pathology.
What's really so disturbing about this crime is that it appears the entire reason that she killed these two elderly residents was to avoid the consequences and the inconvenience of being investigated over their complaints. So she was already on probation at the time, and she just didn't want the inconvenience. She didn't want anyone looking into what she was doing. And when she heard about the complaints they'd made, she believed that it would be easier for her, it would be more convenient for her if she simply erased the problem, if she simply killed them and the complaints would disappear, rather than having to go through more investigations into her conduct.
I just thought to myself, you're going down, girlfriend. There's no way you're going to walk out of this courtroom. No way.
The jury found her guilty, and she was given a 36-year maximum sentence with 27 years non-parole. So that's an extremely lengthy sentence, and Megan Haynes certainly will be a very old woman herself by the time she ever gets out of jail.
Megan Haynes meets many of the criteria that you find for healthcare serial killers. She had a spotty track record in disciplinary terms. She came from an uncertain background. She was marginal. And she's stout.
Megan Haynes. You know, she's destroyed a lot of people. A lot of people. She's destroyed a lot of lives. I mean, I come from a family of probably 40. We're all destroyed with what she's done to us. And then you've got Izzy's family. They're all destroyed. You've got her children. How destroyed are they with what she's done? Do evil people ever think of others other than themselves? I don't think so. But like I said, I don't hate her. She's not worth my energy.
I love you. Yes, I do.